Hey, what is up? The Leafs Convo back in business for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. It is February 28, 2021. The Leafs winners of two straight, now 16-4-2 on the season. A 4-0 blanking of the Oilers in Edmonton. Jack Campbell with the goose egg. No Austin Matthews, no Freddie Anderson. Michael, no problem.
Good morning, Norm. Yeah, it was, I believe, probably their best overall effort of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a couple other games where they've been pretty close to a 60-minute effort. I think last night was because I think they had to step it up with Matthews out. It probably would have been even more of a challenge had Michael Hutchinson been in goal. But you have to give credit. Michael Hutchinson did play well in the victory over Calgary on Wednesday. But Campbell being back in the lineup and playing great was one part of the victory. But it was just the overall, step up by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
With the acknowledgement that Matthews was not in the game. I think it was John Tavares' best game of the season. And, we'll go over a number of things, but I mean, it was a really good effort and something that you haven't seen from Leaf teams in the past. You'll see it in spurts throughout a game, but you don't see it through 60 minutes. And last night was a complete 60-minute effort by this team.
Yeah, it was great, top to bottom. Uncle John with two apples. William Nylander got Michael Hutchinson a win the other night over Calgary. Mm-hmm. He gave up his man. The Flames scored. You know what ensued. Nylander poked at a puck during a crease scramble, then went end to end to win it in overtime. That was fantastic. So the Leafs' first power play opportunity against the Oilers, Willie scores on the power play, making it 3 straight for him. He's starting to regenerate a little bit, but that's what you want, right? In a game where you get the first opportunity to make your mark with the man advantage, it's the opening salvo.
I think it was 2016 when Nylander had been called up by the Leafs at the end of the season, the end of the 15-16 season, and he got sent back down to the Marlies for the playoffs. And I remember distinctly Sheldon Keefe benching Nylander during a playoff series, and then the next game comes back and scores a hat trick.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems that he has to be poked. He has to be prodded to get the best out of him. I don't know whether that was the benching at the end of the third period in Montreal last week, but he was, I think, in a slumber throughout most of the first game against Calgary on Monday, and then throughout 2.5 periods on Wednesday. And then, as I described to you, you've got Dr. Nylander and Mr. Willie, like well Dr. Done. Jekyll.
Well done, Mike.
Yeah,
You should get paid
Dr.
for that.
Yeah, I wish. I wish I could patent it or copyright it. But Dr. Nylander only shows up when he is poked or prodded. Most of the time, it's Mr. Willie. It's that happy-go-lucky guy who doesn't seem to be in touch with anything, sort of drifting around, oblivious. And we get that, I'd say, 8 games out of 10. But the 2 games that they do get Dr. Nylander showing up, he's a difference maker. He is awe-inspiring, and that was the goal against Calgary, where he cuts in on his off wing, converts to the forehand and flips it over David Riddich's shoulder. So, when you get that difference maker, he is a big time difference maker. And last night, especially in the first period, you could see on that sort of makeshift second line with Kerfoot and Barabanov, he was really skating, he was really creating, and then on the power play, he converts. And they need more of that. But I just don't know. We've seen William Nylander since 2016. I think that's the guy we're going to see for the rest of his career. And to me, that's not good enough. But for right now, they'll take those 2 or 3 games in 10 that he performs at a high level.
Who's good? Who's bad? Dr. Willie and Mr. William? How does this work?
Dr. Nylander is the good.
Okay.
Because Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Jekyll was the good.
Okay.
Mr. Hyde was the bad. So Mr. Willie is the bad.
I think OG's Converse, we should start up a Patreon page to fund Mike and his little creations here. I'm looking forward to the next one. That'd be pretty. It's just spectacular. Do you have any commentary or any name creations for Tyson Barrie?
I mean, the funny thing is that in this recent winning streak that the Oilers have had, Tyson Barrie, I think he's the third or fourth leading scorer on the Oilers. I mean, he's become the Tyson Barrie that we saw before he came to the Leafs and Mike Babcock screwed him up.
Yeah.
He's an offensive defenseman. He's never been a two-way guy, and if you put him on the power play and if you have him rush the puck, he is what he is. And I mean, I think the unfair thing, and I think the thing that Leaf fans have to come to grips with, is that I don't think that you could, and this was a misrepresentation of what Mike Babcock did. You cannot, make a Ferrari, out
of a Fiat.
Right. Well, no, I was gonna say you can't make a Ferrari tow garbage.
Oh, okay.
And it's like,
well, if you put a proper tow package on the chassis, and I could get you that for about $650.
But hey, an F-150 from Oak Ridge Ford can definitely tow a lot of heavy stuff.
It certainly can. With a Class 4 hitch, you're at about 7,500 pounds on the 2.7 liter. Anyway,
there you go. But
oh my God, we're gonna get killed. People hate it, but they help pay the bills. Hey, just on Willie though, I think this is what we're gonna get, and he's been in the league long enough now. Statistically, metrically, he'll always be the best player in the league to his faction. What he produces night in and night out is spotty. Hopefully he's there in the end when the team needs him. He will collect points as he goes, and the number tally will look pretty respectable. That was just effervescent against Calgary. Nice to see him score again early against Edmonton. Mitch Marner in on that goal, John Tavares. I want to see everybody contributing because this team needs to keep working on itself as this interesting season progresses towards the playoffs. Because once the curtain rises on the border and it's time to commingle with the rest of the league on a short-term basis in order to keep going, there is just no time to fuck around. You have to be ready to play. And all of this is just the preamble for what's to come. And if Nylander, Tavares, Marner, Matthews, the whole crew, Simmons, Thornton, the list, you can go down the list. These guys are ready to rock. They really should put themselves in a position to win their first Stanley Cup since 1967. That's why they're playing, right? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. Norm with Mike. The third line. And this lends to the essence of the season and what we're talking about, podcast in, podcast out, and that we need a team effort. The third line was really spectacular, and in a game where the top player in the league isn't involved, and you are looking for more contributions, not just on the score sheet, but throughout.
For one thing, and this is not an insult against Zach Hyman, but when Zach Hyman is the member of a line that has the most finish, maybe you're in a little bit of trouble because, he's not exactly a gifted goal scorer. He's just one of the best workers in the league. But Ilya Mikheyev, could not throw a pebble in Lake Ontario right now. But I love his work ethic. He just hustles, and he's on the opposition at every point. And Pierre Engvall over the last, I think, 5 or 6 games has really stepped it up. And, I think what Sheldon Keefe has been looking for from Engvall is, he's a big guy. He's as fast as anybody, but to play with physicality. He's 6'5". He's very rangy with that great reach. And if he becomes, if he applies himself physically, that just makes him into an incredible weapon as a third or even a fourth line guy. And last night he rubbed out Draisaitl along the boards, he's big enough to do that. Draisaitl is a big dude, and that line that it played with such energy, and I think it was probably overall the Leafs' most effective line on the night. You can see, how things could come together. I mean, you definitely want Zach Hyman playing a third line role, not because he's not capable of playing a top six role, but when everybody comes back, and we know, they've had injuries all year, so you haven't had a full lineup together since game 1 or 2.
Yep. And that's to be expected.
Right, but when you come to the playoffs, if you can extend that lineup and have Zach Hyman playing on a third line checking line with Mikheyev and Engvall or Kerfoot or whatever mix that Sheldon Keefe comes up with, and having somebody like Simmons or maybe somebody that they acquired at the deadline being added to that top six, it just makes this team deeper and more difficult to play against. And I think you saw that last night. I mean, the Oilers are a top heavy team with 3 really good forwards and a couple other good youngsters like Yamamoto, but it's mostly Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, and Draisaitl, and they kept those guys away from the scoring zones for the most part, and they were, I think, outworked by the Leafs. And when that depth is there, they are one of the most difficult teams in the league to play against. All they need is competent defense and decent goaltending with the bevy of talent that they have up front, and they can go a long way.
I like how we're talking about the third line developing into a support line, an energy line, a checking line, with these young characters who are still impressionable in that mix and willing to be developed and molded and led by a guy like Zach Hyman. You notice, Mike, we're talking about the forwards and all this success, and we are not lamenting on a group of defensemen who are leaving a lot to be desired. There's something to be said about that. Something's happening here.
Well, Kevin Bieksa last night during the broadcast, pointed out something that I've been aware of for, I'd say the last month or so. Look at the stability, and believe me, there was no greater critic of Zach Bogosian in Buffalo than myself, because he was constantly injured.
And you live there.
Yeah, right. But I mean, you see the guy every day. He was constantly out of the lineup. And when he was in the lineup, he was playing in a top 4 role, playing with Rasmus Dahlin or playing with Ristolainen and at times. And he was playing 20, 22, 23 minutes a night, and he was exposed. But the way he's playing with the Leafs, playing a bottom pairing role, playing 14 minutes a night, playing penalty kill, being physical, not being asked to do a lot, just do no harm. That is perfect for him. And he has been a stabilizing force on that bottom pairing, along with either Lettinen or Dermott.
You don't hear about it. We don't hear about it.
And honestly, that's what you want. It's like if when you have a defenseman who you don't hear about, that means he's not making mistakes. And he makes the odd mistake. Everybody does, but most of the time he's clearing the front of the net. He's being physical. Last night at the end of the game, I don't know what Edmonton Ford it was, but he was jousting with the guy, and it wouldn't let him sort of get the upper hand on him, because we know it's a 3-game series, so you can have these constant battles going on over the next couple games. But he wouldn't let him get the upper hand. And I have to give kudos to Justin Hall, even though I don't think Tyler Ennis meant to brush by Jack Campbell. The fact that Ennis made contact with Campbell's head at the end of the first period, and Hall filled him into the boards and sort of threw that message as, you hit our goaltender, we're going to get you. And that is something that this team has lacked in the past. I don't know how many times Freddie Anderson or whatever goaltender got hit and there was no response, and you need a response there. Yeah, negative reinforcement.
Matthew Lytle in Community, how awesome was it to see Hall and everyone else on the ice stick up for Campbell when Ennis knocked his head? So refreshing to me, Matthew says. Just shows the pieces added in the offseason have finally changed the room.
Another thing, and I know we're going to talk about Campbell in a second, but the one thing that I think has been apparent from everything that we've seen through the 20 some odd games that the Leafs have played, you say, oh, these guys like each other. I mean, that's all fine and good, but they stick up for each other, and you see like the esprit de corps that this team has. They genuinely, they like each other and they want to win for each other. And there was, at the end of the game when they're, patting Campbell on the head, they were genuinely happy for a guy who was out for almost 5 weeks, and he's very well liked in the locker room. But it just seems like there is that thing, that sort of unconscious thing that we've seen. Maybe it's the addition of Thornton, maybe it's the addition of Simmons. Right now, you have to give Kyle Dubas a lot of credit for the mix that he's brought in: Bogosian, Simmons, Thornton, keeping Spezza around. It is professional guys, but it's a support structure that the Matthews and the Marners and the Tavares and the Rileys haven't had, and it's paying dividends right now.
He's deviated from his original blueprint. All the guys in social media, the guys in front of their laptops telling them this is how you need to build a team. Sure, I'll get started that way, and that whole concept went kerplunk. And he made the changes, and let's hope he continues to tweak and accessorize and modify the team accordingly so that the group is put in the best position to finally win a Stanley Cup. Because everything that this team does on a nightly basis is to progress forward and win the championship. That's what it's about, Mike. Everyone else derives their own entertainment and their own need from the product, and that's fine as we go along. But the ultimate goal is to finally win a championship. And right now it's shaping up to look like this group will give the organization its best chance to do that since that last group won it in 1967. Yeah, among the defensemen last night, I mean, the ice time spread out really well. You got 4 veterans with determination who are holding it down back there. Morgan Rielly, he's going to play 24, 25, 26 minutes a night, probably pushing 30 when the games have more meaning. Jake Muzzin, what's happening with him, Mike? I mean, he's been with the team a while now. Is he finding his way? Is he developing a little bit more, if that's even possible, having been in the league as long as he has? But here's a guy who was injured, could have been really serious. He needed a bit of time, like a game or two, and then he gets back in the lineup, 22 minutes, an assist, 4 hits. I mean, he clearly is one of the stalwart defensemen on this team.
Yeah, I mean, he provides the physical edge, that had been missing over the last few years. He's a top 4 defenseman, second pairing guy. Him and Hall, their size, they have mobility, so they can be that shutdown pairing. But, as you've seen from his point totals, he's providing secondary offense. I think he has 11 or 12 assists now. So he's been effective, really effective. And that trade that they made with the LA Kings, they made 2 trades with the Kings, one to get Muzzin, one to get Campbell. Both have paid off. The Kings got good returns on both of those players, but it was like any good trade. It was good for both teams. And I think Muzzin, along with Bogosian on the bottom pairing, they've been stabilizing forces. And you have to say TJ Brody as well. I mean, we sort of take it for granted. We've been talking about looking for a partner for Morgan Rielly for years. It was like Dion Phaneuf. It's like, okay, Dion Phaneuf was a good defenseman at times, but he had to play with, Corbinian Holzer and Mike Koska and, Keith Awley and like all these guys. And it takes down, it sort of takes down like the quality of that one defenseman because he's got to compensate for somebody who's not a number 2. And I think Brody, based on the way he played in Calgary, I think, right now, it looks like Kyle Dubas was right on target. I mean, he played a secondary role with Mark Giordano in Calgary, and he's doing the same thing with Morgan Rielly. You don't notice TJ Brody a lot, but then you look at the score sheet and he's +1 and he's played 23, 24 minutes on the right side with Morgan Riley. And that's what you want out of a second, a sidekick on a top pairing.
I want to get into a few more comments from community, then we can get out of here. Any summary on the game last night or any other players you want to talk about before we move forward?
Well, I mean, Jason Spezza. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
I just have to say, I would offer him a $700,000 contract until he can't skate or can't walk. That's how much of a character I mean, that's a patented move. And it was funny because Campbell in the post-game media availability called him vintage, and apparently that's his nickname. But he, even in his late 30s, he can still skate and he can still create offensively. Yeah. I mean, when Barabanov made a bad giveaway in the first period, Sheldon Keefe didn't hesitate and put Spezza on the line with Kerfoot and Nylander because he trusts him. And him on that fourth line playing either center or wing with, last night it was with Boyd and VC. He just goes out there 10, 12 minutes and he just gives you everything.
And that goal.
And that goal was incredible. He deked, he faked out Mike Smith out of his skates. I mean, but that's apparently that's a patented Spezza move.
You remember how dominant the Senators were with him at the helm and Alfredson, and I think it was Kovalev and Chris Phillips, and I don't know if Chara was on the team at that time. They were so dominant. They beat the shit out of the Leafs night in and night out.
Until it got to the playoffs.
Yeah, but that's true. But that was Spezza-esque from that. I mean, that was Senators-esque from that era. That was fantastic. That was a throwback and just delightful to see.
But this is the thing. You mentioned 67, and I was a month when they won the Stanley Cup in 67, so I don't remember it fondly. If we wanted to talk to Kevin Shea or Paul Patch,
in 67, Mike, you were just wrapping up your first marriage.
Yeah, there you go. But go back in history to a time that we all remember. The team that made the conference final in 2002. You had Pat Quinn assemble a team that brought in like veterans from, and 04, I think that was when they brought in Leach and Francis.
Yep.
But throughout the Pat Quinn era, he brought in these veteran guys to play support roles, and that really helped the Leafs. The new one with Neuendijk, with Roberts. Okay, they're doing the same thing here. You've got your star players like Matt Sundin in 02, but here you've got Matthews, you've got Marner, you've got Tavares as the core, but you've got guys like Thornton and Simmons and Spezza who can step it up at certain points and win you a game, and that is going to be invaluable. And I'm telling you right now, all the indications is that Kyle Dubas is going to make a deal before the deadline for a top 6, top 9 forward. And we heard the Michael Granlund stuff. I don't know if I buy into that. I think there would be other options out there. The one name that I heard and I think would be an intriguing ad was Eric Staal, who's in Buffalo, who, the Sabres are probably going to sell in the next few weeks, start selling in the next few weeks.
Bring on every veteran reclamation project there is.
Well, he's not. I mean, he can still play. He can play the wing and he can play center. I mean, I think that Dubas is not going to hesitate to bring in somebody like that who is not making a ton of money, who has won a Stanley Cup, who is a good pro. I mean, it may not be Staal, but I wouldn't doubt that they add somebody that nobody has thought of before the deadline.
OG's converts. Do you think the Leafs augment the group with a veteran like Staal, or do you think you need to bring in some young lunatic with skill, but not a lot of savvy and experience, just to, reduce the average age of the team? Let's have a chat below this post on YouTube. Of course, community is the place where you can get at us directly. Nicholas, how long until Simmons returns, and where will he slot back in?
Well, I believe his injury was early February. Yeah, it was February 7th or February 6th. So they said 6 weeks. So I'm thinking probably mid to late March. It's a wrist injury, so I'm sure he's probably skating, and the skating aspect of his game will come back fairly quickly. The cardio aspect of his game, but it's just the ability to handle the puck and shoot the puck. So I would think probably like around St. Patrick's Day would be a good target for him to possibly come back.
Erish, what do you think of Barabanov in the top six? He's looked good.
I think he has played his best hockey the last couple games with more opportunity, and that's encouraging. I thought he played pretty well last night, although, like I said, it was a glaring giveaway, and it was the Connor McDavid, and that would make that made it even worse. But I think he is establishing some trust with Sheldon Keefe that he could slot in on the fourth line. I don't think he's a top six guy. I don't think he's going to be in that kind of mix. But I do think that, what he is doing right now and what somebody like Jimmy Vesey, who has been, disappointing. I mean, I think yesterday he had an assist on the Spezza goal, and that was his first point in like 15 games. I like what Vesey brings in terms of a penalty killer, but I think they wanted him to score a little more, and he's just not scoring. So, it's going to be at a certain point, Sheldon Keefe is going to make his decision on his lineup as like a solid 12-man group. And you don't want to be on the outside looking in at when he makes that final decision. And right now, I'd say Barabanov is sort of leading at the quarter pole over Vesey.
Yeah, for some of these guys, this is still an audition. Big Show is in, 35 some odd games from now. When the curtain rises, the door opens, and the union between the United States and Canada when it comes to the NHL starts again, and that'll be the playoffs. So for guys like VC and Barabanov and the support players, whether young, tenured, the audition continues. Which of these players will land the big spots, the final spots for a team that will make a push for a Stanley Cup? Timberwolf, our old pal, who the hell are these Leafs goalies and where have they been for 3 years? Leads into Corey Parrish's question. Hey, Jack Campbell was fantastic against Edmonton on Saturday. Will he get another start as a reward on Monday?
No, I mean, Jack Campbell has been fantastic. I mean, right now, his goals against is 1.33. He's got a 951 save percentage. That those numbers aren't sustainable, but they are. Then he's ready for the Hall of Fame. And he's played great ever since the Leafs acquired him. But it's going to be important. And I said this at the beginning of the year, for Campbell to give Frederik Andersen a night off, and more than just a night off. I think he needs to play more. And based on the way he's playing, I don't think that they're going to hesitate, especially like in a 3-game series, to say give Andersen 2 and Campbell 1. And if hopefully he stays healthy, and when Andersen comes back, I expect them to use Campbell, not judiciously. I think they're going to use him more than a backup has been used for a while.
So Edmonton again on Monday, regardless of who's in net. What are you hoping to see from this team?
Well, I mean, I'd love to see an effort like they played on Saturday. I mean, it's impossible to expect that. I mean, but I mean, they have to play that way. I mean, one of the things that was really apparent, they didn't take any penalties, and they didn't allow Draisaitl and McDavid and Tyson Barrie on the point to really generate a lot of offense. So, if they could do that. Now, we expect Matthews to be back on Monday. Yeah, maybe since they won on Saturday, they decide they can give him another day of rest. But I think he'll probably be back, as he skated yesterday, and they just decided to be careful with him. But at some point Anderson's going to be back. But if they can put an effort that's 80% of what they had against Edmonton on Saturday, they have a good chance to win.
Maruf Lackey and community, what should the Leafs do in terms of a trade? Mike, you mentioned Eric Staal. That would be a lot of fun. Also from Nicholas, keep it up, boys. You always have stellar content. Thank you so much, Nick. And Samurai, thanks for the shout out on Twitter. Mike, what are you working on at hockeybuzz.com?
Well, I'm, along with, my speculation about Staal, I was going to write at some point this week about, maybe the target of like, say, 5 players the Leafs may go after.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a Granlund or a Staal, I think that they're going to look for somebody who can play in their top 9 with some physicality, not like Boston picking up Jared Tenorti, not like guy who's going to be an enforcer.
Nice.
I'm talking about, and I know that, that Marcus Foligno is not available in Minnesota because he just signed a long-term extension. But, maybe if Columbus starts to fall out of it, Nick Foligno would be somebody that they could make a deal
Oh,
for.
for sure.
But yeah, but there are, a top 9 forward who is battle tested, who can play that physical game, because when they get into the playoffs and they're playing a Calgary and Matthew Tkachuk, or they're playing Montreal with Josh Anderson, or they're playing Winnipeg with Wheeler and Scheifele, there is going to be a physical aspect to that series. And the Leafs really, they got out hit, I think it was like 40-20 by the Oilers, and the Oilers aren't exactly an overly physical team. So that's something that I think the Leafs need to address before the deadline. And if they can't add another score, then maybe they're going to go in that physical direction.
Yeah, the more talent, the merrier, Mike, because at some point, this could become a war of attrition. And you will need bodies ready to go, who are actually ready to go, in place of those who can't continue on. Mike, thanks for everything you do. OG's Converts. You can catch me on Facebook, Norm at Oak Ridge Ford. If you wanted to give me a like there, I'd appreciate it very much. Not a lot of hockey stuff, just more Ford stuff. When you support me and Mike and our endeavor with Oak Ridge Ford, you help support the podcast. For Mike, I'm Norm. We're up.